Perfect. Hi everybody. I'm Becca. Welcome to this event, which is being hosted by Manchester University Press. And today we are celebrating the launch of Writing Creatively for Work or Study, Easy Techniques to Engage Your Readers by Helen Cara. Firstly, I'd just like to apologise profusely to anyone who is here who tried to join this morning's session and was unable to. If you have joined this session instead, thank you so much. Before I introduce Helen and hand over to Helen, just a few bits of housekeeping. Firstly, this event is being recorded. We would ask that you keep your mics muted until the Q&A portion of the event, just so as to not be off-putting or disturb Helen while she's speaking. Feel free to leave your camera off if you don't wish to appear, but if you would like to show your face, feel free to turn it on. If you do have a question or a comment or just anything you'd like to say, you can post in the chat box or the Q&A function at any point during the event. We will mainly look at the chat box and the Q&A at the end of the event after the initial writing exercise, and I will pose your questions to Helen unless you prefer to ask them yourself. If you would like to purchase a copy of the book we're about to kind of discuss or that this event is based on, I do have a discount code. I will post it in the chat shortly. It is not time limited, so you can buy it whenever you like, but we would obviously encourage you to order it and use it following this event. Just in terms of the structure of today's event, it will last approximately an hour. We'll begin with a bit of a taster workshop, including 2 short writing exercises that should last around 30 minutes. And then we'll move on to the in-conversation discussion portion with your questions and my questions for Helen. So now I'm going to introduce Helen, who I'll be handing over to in a moment. So Helen Cara is an independent researcher, scholar and author. She's the author of several books, including Creative Research Methods, A Practical Guide, and has been teaching creative professional writing to people from a wide variety of occupations and workplaces since 2015. So without further ado, over to you, Helen.
Thank you, Becca, and thank you, Wendy, for having your camera on. I know some people can't, and I know some people don't want to, and that's all fine. I would never put pressure on anyone, but it is so nice to see a human face or two. So I'm very grateful to, oh, Teresa, hi. Very grateful to those who can and will, but it's not essential. Hi, Sarah. It's just, I find that if all I'm talking to is a screen full of little black squares, it's quite difficult with nothing coming back to know if I'm hitting a mark or just, you know, nosediving, really. Right, I need to share my screen with you, which always makes Zoom go all wrong because Zoom still thinks everybody only has one screen, which is so 2019, frankly. So having shared my screen, I will then need to put you all back so I can see you all and find the chat again and so on. Just take me a moment. So you can see that I've written a bunch of books. This isn't all of them, this is just some of them. But it should give you a sense that I do know a bit about what I'm talking about because it's something I do. This is the idea of this. And also I will send a PDF of these slides to Becca afterwards for circulation. Please don't send me private messages on Zoom during the session because I can't cope. It's one thing too many. But if you want to get in touch with me, you absolutely can. You'll have my email address. I'm easy to find online. I don't hide. Just please remind me where we met because I do this sort of thing a lot and I have a really bad memory for names and faces at the best of times. So yeah, there we go. That's enough about me. Blog and YouTube channel if you want to find, both got info about writing and stuff. I firmly believe that all writing is creative. I don't care if you're just writing a shopping list. I don't care if you're just writing a text message or an email. There's always scope for creativity. And particularly if what you're doing is putting together words to make sentences that nobody else has made before and sentences to make paragraphs ditto, that's a creative process. I don't care if you're just writing a very factual account, it's still you're creating that writing. It's a creative process. Also, for many people, writing's a key part of work. Not for everyone, but for many people. And creative writing techniques can be very useful in writing for the workplace. We think of creative writing as something that happens over here with like novels and playwrights and poems and people. And work writing happens over here when you have to write an annual report or whatever it is you have to write. But actually, it's all based on storytelling. We're a storytelling species. We tell stories to each other all of the time. Its stories form the bedrock of all of our communication. And this applies, as far as I can tell, to all cultures on our planet. I think maybe when the aliens land, they'll conclude this is a story planet. And we learn through storytelling. And the thing about storytelling is something has to change. If it's just a sequence of events. It's not a story, it's a list. So the classic example, which I think was Ian Forster's example, was if you say the king died and then the queen died, that's not a story. But if you say the king died and then the queen died of grief, that is a story, because it's the king's death that caused inadvertently ultimately the queen to die. So you need some causation, some causality, some not just a list. But we all know about stories. It's not complicated. You know about stories way more. If you think you don't, you do. If you watch films, yeah, you read novels, you maybe go to plays, you do all sorts. The stories come in all sorts of forms, animations, all sorts of forms. And some of the techniques we can use, obviously, for stories, storytelling, some kind of narrative arc. And again, it doesn't matter if you're writing a piece for a trade magazine, or a piece for an annual report, or a piece for a sales report, or whatever. You're telling some kind of a story. We can use tension, not necessarily the kind of tension, well, probably not the kind of tension in most cases that you might get in an actual novel or a film where people are having a literal punch up or gunfight or something. But we can set up perhaps a tension between two potential positions that your department might take in this venture that you're writing a report on for your team. So maybe we could do this, maybe we could do that, maybe we could do the other, and then not give the resolution straight away. Add some delay, that keeps readers engaged. It's a simple technique, but once you start thinking about it, you find more and more places where it's applicable. Repetition is strong sauce. It's kind of the chili pepper of writing. So you don't want to overdo it because you'll have everybody go, but it can be really useful for emphasis. Politicians do it. You think of politicians saying, what's important? Location, 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 you know, this kind of thing. And then there's recapitulation, which is a sort of repetition where you just, if you've got a long document you're working on, you might say, you know, in the first section of this report, we learned that such and such, and now we can see in the light of the other sections that this has had this effect or impact. So you don't repeat it all over again, but you recapitulate, you remind the reader of what happened earlier that as a while ago they may have forgotten. Metaphor can be really useful for clarifying. We use metaphors way more than we think we do. It's something like 1 every 10 seconds in speech somebody's figured out, and also in writing. There's dead metaphors and live metaphors. We can't really go into all. I'm a bit fascinated by metaphors. I need to rein myself in now and not go into all of the details. But there's lots of scope for clarification. Analogy too can be used for clarification. Analogy and metaphor are different. Metaphor is where one thing really stands for another. So you might say, you know, he was so furious he roared like a lion, and that would be a metaphor. Some people would argue that's a simile, but we're not going to get into that debate. Whereas an analogy might be when I talk about writing, when I'm teaching writing, I talk about you need to go through at least 3 drafts. Usually, almost everyone does. And it's a bit like ceramics, where you first prepare your clay, then you form whatever it is that you're making, and then you decorate it with glazes and so on. So that's an analogy that helps people to understand writing as a craft and the iterative process it needs to take. Rhyme can be really useful for resonance, not necessarily in poetry, sometimes in prose too. And there can be all sorts of, there's a lovely contract which was devised. I found it on the internet. I wonder, I probably can't find it very quickly in the book. So this is going to be a bit fumbly because I need to use the index. Contract, not in the index. That's a shame. I'll find it later. But there's a short little contract about work for hire, and it's got rhyme in it, and it makes it much more impactful. You wouldn't expect to find rhyme in a contract, but there's an example. Dialogue can be useful to demonstrate interactions. I found some dialogue in a textbook on engineering for chemists from 1973. So these ideas are not necessarily new. You wouldn't expect to find dialogue in a textbook on anything, let alone engineering for chemists, or it might have been chemistry for engineers. I'm not sure, but it was one or the other. Characterization can be useful. So you might make a little pen portrait of a typical customer or client to help with your training, new staff, or you might, there's all sorts of ways you could use characterization. And sensory language is really key to all of this because it's so much more engaging. So that's the kind of language that incorporates our sensory experiences. There'll be examples later on. And there are loads of different formats. Now, obviously, I can't go through all these in detail, but just to take a couple, the epistolary format, maybe not familiar to some people, that used to be just about letters. So there's a lovely book called 84 Charing Cross Road, which is the edited correspondence of an American book lover and a London bookseller. She bought books from him for years, and they did it, but this was all pre-internet, so they did it by post, and they corresponded in letters. And it's a lovely, lovely book. But now the epistolary genre has expanded because there could be a novel written in text messages or emails, or there's many different ways of doing this. Logs and notes, you might not think case notes would be a place where you could do creative writing, but I was a social worker in a former existence, and I can tell you for sure you can do creative writing in case notes, in logs. I know of a laboratory, a science laboratory where they analyze human tissue in Perth, Australia. They keep a lab book, which is a record of what's happened. And the lab book there is kept in limericks. Every entry in the lab book has to be a limerick. If you're not sure what a limerick is, there's one coming up soon. So lots of these aren't, this isn't even an exhaustive list. This is just some examples. So there's macro creativity, micro creativity. Some people can write a whole graphic novel for their, or a complete zine for their project report or whatever. That's great, but we can't all do that. But we can all do the micro creativity where we might just be careful about the words we choose, add a bit of sensory language, a little image, a metaphor here and there, a bit of this and that, which we can sprinkle on our writing like lovely seasoning to make it delicious. Talking about word choice, if you're writing in English, it's very rich in synonyms for most words. Not all words, but most words. So if you wanted to say someone was happy, you've got an awful lot of options to choose from. And this can be a bit problematic because, you know, one person's upbeat might be another person's gleeful. But the point is it's your writing. So you pick the one that you feel like it works best in the context that you're writing in for what you want to convey. And that will be a good choice. There are some myths I'd like to quickly do a bit of demystification. You do not start at the beginning and write till you get to the end. That's how we read books. That's how we watch films, but it's not how things get written. You can start right in the middle. You can start somewhere you don't even know where it's going to be. Just write stuff down. You can figure out the organization of it later on. You're never going to get it right first time. I've been teaching for 10 years. I have met one person who can get writing right the first time, and that person was an exceptionally gifted person with an IQ that was off the scale. I say you can't. Obviously, that one person can't, but it's really, really rare. Most normal mortals, like all of us, I suspect, need to go through several drafts. Another myth is that the writing is a very isolated profession and we all do it all on our own. We really don't. Producing a book like this takes an absolute team of people. I had terrific, very useful feedback, both on the book proposal and then on the draft manuscript. I had testimonials from people that I needed, but also I needed all of the people at the publishers, the commissioning editor, the promotion people, the production people, the sales and marketing, you know, the whole lot. And then lots of people gave me permission to include their work, to include their poem or their piece of prose or whatever. I needed all of them as well. So it's a big team of people in the end that makes the book. Now, not every piece of writing is as big or complex as a whole book, but whatever you're writing, another pair of eyes on it will be so helpful. And another myth is if you've got a big piece of work to write, you need a big piece of time to do it in. And that's really not the case. You're going to do better in short bits of time where you can really focus your attention. I often think half an hour is a good period of time to really focus on writing. If you can switch off all your notifications, put your phone on silent, just give yourself half an hour. Not everyone can do that, but switch off as much as you can. Shut down as many programs and browser windows as you can. If you struggle with this, there are programs that can block the internet for specific periods of time that you choose. That can be helpful too. So just to prove that you don't need much time, we're now going to do a little exercise. I bet some of you have done free writing before, but I bet not all of you have. Free writing is great. You take a little short period of time. We're going for 3 minutes, which I will time on my phone, which I'm now going to have to take off silent to make sure that we get the notification. And what you need for free writing is an active prompt. Oh, hello, Mariam. You did a free writing event yesterday. Well, this will be revision you probably don't need then. I mean, sit it out if you want to. If you feel like you've done enough free writing in the recent past, that's completely fine. but you need an active prompt. You need more. Okay, great. Go for it. So this might be, I want to say, if you're thinking about a piece of writing you're about to do, some people use this as a warm up in the same way that if you're a runner, you're not going to put your trainers on and leg it out the door at top speed. You'll do some warm ups, some stretches, maybe brisk walk for a bit before you start jogging, whatever. It can also be useful if you've got a big emotional thing going on. If you want to say, if you want to write about, if someone's just really annoyed you, I'm angry because, I'm angry because, it's quite a good way of getting it out of you and onto the page. It might be you're ecstatically, joyously happy because you've just found out you're pregnant and you've been trying for ages, or someone's just proposed marriage and you're delighted or whatever. But as long as it's got I in it, doesn't matter what the prompt is. I'm suggesting I want to say, but you can use any prompt, and I'm not going to ask you to share what you write. It's just we're going to talk about the experience. So it's purely for your own experimentation, learning, and benefit, and you must keep writing for the whole 3 minutes. Keep your hand moving with the pen or your fingers on the keyboard, and don't try to edit. Don't worry if you spell something wrong or your grammar's not quite right. It doesn't matter. This is just an exercise. So keep going, and if you do get stuck, literally rewrite the prompt. I want to say, until it takes you off somewhere else, till you can go do this writing almost without even thinking. Do you all understand what I'm asking you to do now? Anyone got any questions about the exercise? And I'm going to time us for 3 minutes. Ready, steady, go. That's the sound of time's up. No, stop. There we go. Good, well done. That was some actual writing. How did that feel? Tell us in the chat if you can how you got on with that. Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? Have you done it before? Have you not? Were there any surprises in it? you don't have to disclose details. Was it helpful? Did you hate it? How did you find that? What was your reaction? Oh, a lot more than yesterday. Good for you. Teresa, you felt like you met yourself a bit more. Yeah, it can be really useful for that. Louis, you got some things off your chest. Great. And Melissa, yes, you found it helpful. Betty, you found it hard to choose a prompt. Yeah, that can happen. That can happen. It's why I suggest one that you can use if you want, but if it doesn't feel right for you, then you'd need to try to find another one. Wendy, useful and often satisfying. Yeah, and you used to use it with students. Yep. Marion, you wrote about random worries. Well, that's a great idea. My random worries are, that would be a prompt. Poonam, you enjoyed it and you were reminded that you always have a lot that you want to say. I know that feeling for sure. Great. Good, well done. Carol, yes, it does give you a chance to think through stuff. It can be quite cathartic and it can be a useful thing to do sometimes if you've had an experience and you need to debrief and you haven't got anyone to debrief with. Free writing about it can be helpful until you get to where you can talk to someone. Diana, you found it good. Yeah, you're welcome. You're going to read it. Yes, you will. This is a technique you can use now if you didn't have it before. Oh, Sarah, you found yourself with a loose plan for the piece that has so far been a staring at a blank screen exercise. Excellent stuff. It's a really helpful thing. And some people will set aside half an hour to write and do the first 3 minutes for free writing just to get going. It also helps to get over the, oh no, it's a blank page kind of feeling and it helps. This is something someone emailed in a question. Could I talk about how to silence the internal critics? Free writing is a great way to silence your internal critics because what your internal critics, we all have them. I have them. I've written a load of books and I still have bits of voice in my head going, you're rubbish. They're really going to find out about you this time. You know, you can't really do this. It's sort of imposter syndrome stuff happening. And free writing is a really good way to shut up those critical voices because you are demonstrating to yourself that you can write and you do write. So it's useful for that. Okay, I better crack on and we're going to run out of time. I want to say a bit about poetry because poetry might surprise people to learn. It's used quite a lot in business. It's used for strategy. This lovely book, What Poetry Brings to Business, is all about how poetry, because it embraces ambiguity, as does business strategy, they have a good match there. And also for communication, the Poetry Business School is a much more recent book, which is based on correspondence. It's got an epistolary element. It's based on correspondence between Deborah Almer, who runs the Poetry Pharmacy in Bishop's Castle, and Mark Constantine, who is the founder of Lush Cosmetics. And Deborah Almer submitted an application for a contest, put the Poetry Pharmacy into some kind of business contest that the founder of Lush was part of the judging panel. And the Poetry Pharmacy didn't win, but he wanted it to have done. So he got in touch with her and said, I'm sorry you didn't win. And, how are things? And can you send me some poems? And they ended up having a big correspondence. And he was kind of her mentor for a while. It's a lovely book. It's not long been out. I love Lush too. There are options with the kind of poetry you use in terms of what forms or free verse. I'll say more about those in a while, but it's useful because you have to use few words. So you have to really get to the essence of something if you're going to use poetry. And you don't have to be a skillful poet because if you're doing poetry for business, you're not writing necessarily poetry to the sort of standard you would do for publication by a poetry publisher or in a poetry magazine. If it's good for its business purpose, then it's good poetry for that purpose. It doesn't have to be quite at the same aesthetic level as it might have to be performed or printed in an actual poetry anthology. So I said I was going to say a bit more about the forms. Free verse is pretty unstructured. You don't need to, you can use rhyme, but you don't need to. You can have short lines, long lines, anything in between. It does need to be a bit poetic. You can't just write random stuff in varying line lengths. And, well, I suppose you could, but there's usually a fair amount of white space around the right-hand side of the words writing in English. Poetic forms, some of the simpler ones, quatrains, limericks. I'll give you an example of each of these and explain the rhyming thing in a little while. Then there are the more complex ones like sestinas, sonnets, villanelles. And you know what? It's not all carved in stone. You can invent a new poetic form if you decide you want to. I could. I probably couldn't, but in theory I could. So here's a quatrain. This is by Ogden Nash, and this has an AABB rhyming scheme. So you can see that the first two lines rhyme with each other, the second two lines rhyme with each other. So AABB. If it was first and third rhymed and second and fourth rhymed, it would be AB, AB. So you get the idea that the letters denote the rhyme scheme at the end of the lines. I'm assuming nobody needs me to read these out to them, my slides out to anyone. Everyone can see okay, but if anyone's got a visual impairment or anything, please let me know, and I'll read more stuff. Limerick. I said I was going to mention limericks because of the lab book that I talked about. This is an old anonymous kind of, it's been around for a long time, this limerick. In some versions, it's not ears. There's a ruder version, but we're in polite company here, so I will not use that on my slide. Ears works perfectly well. So here we have the rhyming scheme AABBA, because the 3 longer lines rhyme with each other and the 2 shorter lines rhyme with each other. Haiku. This is 3 short lines. It used to be taught as a specific number of syllables per line when it was taught in English, but it's a Japanese type of poetry, and Japanese language doesn't have syllables. It has things called sound units, which are different. And there are usually 10 to 14 sound units per haiku, so it's much more flexible than I was taught at school. But what it does do is it describes just a single small event. There's always some kind of connection with nature, and it uses sensory language, and there are no rhymes. So it's quite accessible. Just 3 short lines, single small event, let me give you an example. Oh, sorry, and it's always in the present tense. That's the other thing. So an example by a haiku master, which is a haiku about writing. And you can see here just 3 short lines, no rhymes, not quite. If you say erase again and then it kind of rhymes, but they're not rhymes on purpose, and a poppy bloom. So there's the connection with nature. So this is all it is. A haiku is really quite, actually there is more to haiku if you're going to do them properly, but at the initial stage, this is all then you need to think about. And that's good because I want you to have a go. I want you to have a go at writing a haiku, and I'm going to give you 3 minutes again. Have a go at writing a 3 short lines haiku. You will not be required to share. There will be an opportunity to share if you wish, but I won't be picking on people and saying, Wendy, share yours, because that's just mean. So everyone understand what I'm asking you to do? Do you want me to flip back to the slide with the info? And I'll put the other slide info in the chat, but it's write short haiku. They are short. Write a haiku about your workplace writing, whatever that may be. Everybody good? Ready, steady, go. There we go. All done. Dismiss. Go away, timer. So well done. That's great. You've all written haiku. Let's just get through this. And then if you would like to say anything in the chat about how that was for you, did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you have fun? Did you wish you were doing anything else? And if you want to share your haiku, you're welcome to, but there's no obligation. If you'd like to pop some thoughts and things in the chat. If you're putting it in the chat, I recommend copy and paste if you can write it in somewhere else, because if you hit return in the chat, it will just post the one single line, which will be annoying. Diana, you found it fun. Oh, Lucy, you loved it. How long? I love that haiku. That is awesome. I write and I write. The flowers bloom and die and I write again. Oh, yes. I am so relating to that. It does take a long time, but that's because it's a kind of a difficult craft. Difficult, but not impossible, and practice always helps. Teresa joined this session to be unsure and learn and succeeded. Not sure if I saw haiku. I gather stats, write reports electrically delivered to friends under the same blue sky. That is absolutely a haiku. That is absolutely a haiku. Well done. Mariam, I wrote something. Don't judge because I have a big problem with coming up. No judging here, and you're 16, so wow. Some people are thoughtful, some people lost adventurers, some are lucky finders. That's great, Mariam. That's absolutely great. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Wendy, enjoyable, but worried about, worrying about whether we do things properly. If you're a bit of a perfectionist and you want to be a writer, you'd have to put the whole perfectionism thing down, because there's no such thing as a perfect piece of writing, except maybe the occasional very short poem, but they're rare. Editing for clarity is listening for gaps where new meanings bloom. That is lovely. Sarah's done a haiku about free writing, my first attempt at free writing. I thought I'd sink, but still plunged in and caught a writing wave. I'm reading these out because this session is being recorded and the people on the recording won't be able to see the chat. Diana's written, all rough and jam, as spread on bread, do all day and night. I love that too. The corridor is quiet until I arrive and drop my bags. The clatter, the curse here. That's Sarah Reed. I can see that. Oh, fun. Oh, Mariam, you're a perfectionist, yeah, and an artist. So we have to battle our perfectionism. We really do. Those of us who are perfectionists, who are also artists and writers, we have to battle it, because it does get in the way. Talking of getting in the way, I'm probably taking far too long here. Are we doing Q&A now, or are you talking to me first, Becca? What are we doing?
I thought I could ask you a couple of questions about the book, and then we could hand over to the audience while questions are percolating, if that's okay with you.
That's fine. So I can stop sharing my slides, which is just great, because we're through that part. And go ahead with a couple of questions.
Fab. So, to kind of bring it back to the book, I wondered what inspired you to writing creatively for work or study? Why this book and why now?
This book, because I knew that nobody else had written this book and that it would be useful for a lot of people, because there are so many great examples of the book contains so many great examples of creatively written workplace stuff. So I mentioned the contract, but there's also things like, I'm not going to be able to find things quickly enough in this, I'm sure. But there are examples like, there's examples of dialogue, there's examples of poetry, there's examples of, it tells you the book tells you how to create a metaphor. If you want to create your own live metaphor, that can be fun. Talks a lot about sensory language and voice, the voice of the writer. There's a couple of poems about bits of travel, observational writing. There's a lovely bit of travel writing. There's things like, there's an architecture practice in London that uses a zine to talk about the work it does, which is not a very obvious thing. There are the way that comics and cartoons are used. Comics have been used in advertising. There's just so much. There's so much richness out there. And I'm still finding fabulous new examples, even though I finished the book. I'm not going to write a part two, I can tell you. As for why now, I actually had the idea for this book a few years ago, and I wrote a proposal and I tried it with a bunch of publishers, and none of them were interested. And so I thought, oh, well, that's a book idea that's not a good idea. But then a couple of years ago, I was looking at Manchester University Press and noticed that they'd started publishing trade books alongside their academic books on the sort of topics same sort of topic areas. And I just wondered if MUP might perhaps be interested in this book that I'd thought of so many years ago but hadn't forgotten. And I brushed up the proposal and sent it in, and they were like, oh, yeah, we'll have that. So that's why now.
Yeah, very fair. And I suppose when you're putting that proposal together, when you were writing the book, and now it's kind of there and out in the world, who do you kind of see as the reader persona? Who's the ideal reader for this book, and what do you hope they'll take away from reading it?
I don't know that I have an ideal reader in mind because I think readers, it could be writing for work in the workplace. It could be writing for work related to study, could be people doing a diploma or a master's related to their career, or it could be people who literally have to write for whatever reason. It could be people who simply have to write advertising copy or, any number of things really. But I suppose my ideal reader is someone who's interested in writing, and who's got a bit of a sense of humor. That's always nice, probably helps. Um, and who wants to perhaps expand the way that they write in their workplace and find more joy in it too, because that's a big part, I think. I feel like, for me anyway, using creative approaches is more fun than just simply writing stuff down in a dry and tedious way. And if it's not fun to write, it's not likely to be much fun to read. And that's not to say that writing can always be fun. I mean, there are times where I think, oh, I've got to sit down at my desk and do another 200 words or whatever it is. But a lot of the time it can be fun. It can be fun a lot more than people think. And I think if things can be fun, they should be fun, because why can't we have fun when we're working? Where possible. Not always possible, but where possible.
Yeah, very true. And it kind of builds on something you said earlier, but do you see creative writing as a skill that anyone can develop, or is it something that can come more naturally to some people than others? Is it something you can hone over time?
Pretty much anyone can develop creative writing skills. Some people will struggle with dyslexia, and that can be a barrier. And there are other forms of neurodivergence that can make it difficult, and also disabilities that can make it difficult. So brain injury can make it difficult, dementia can make it difficult. There are some barriers of that kind. But other than those kinds of barriers, I don't see why anyone should not be able to write more creatively, in their working lives and in their lives generally. And it's entertaining for people. It's more fun for readers. It's more engaging if you use sensory language. There's a body of research demonstrating that if we use sensory language and write in engaging ways, people understand more of what we're telling them and they remember better. And why are we writing in the first place if we don't want people to understand and remember what we're putting across?
Absolutely. I just have a last couple questions before I hand over to the audience. So get your questions in the chat, everybody. So yeah, my penultimate question, have you seen any resistance to the idea of incorporating creativity into more formal writing? And if so, how have you responded to that, or how would you respond to that?
Well, that links with one of the questions in the chat. Sarah Reed says, have you ever had any negative reactions to the idea of integrating creative writing in business, which is
Yeah,
pretty much the same question.
yeah,
Yes, at times. I mean, there are people who are very much like, no, that's for the creative people, and I'm not a creative person. And when people tell me they're not creative, my stock answer to that is, well, now, do you have any friends or any family members you get on well with? And they say, yes, because pretty much everyone does. And I say, well, then you're creative because you co-create those relationships in the moment with those people. That is a creative process. And also, people don't think of things like parenting, gardening, cooking, homemaking as creative, but they are. So there's all sorts of creativity. In a sense, every decision we make is a node for potential creativity. I'm not suggesting that we should try to be creative with every single decision, because that would be, that would be a fast route to a mental breakdown, I think. But there's always that possibility and that option. That said, some people do really not think it's appropriate. But I think the answer to that is the precedents. And one of the things I wanted to do with the book was bring together all of the examples, or as many as I could of the examples that I knew, into one place. So it would be a reference where people could look at it and think, actually, so and so's done this way, so maybe I can. Or somebody's done this like this. I can't quite do that like that, but maybe I could take this idea from there and that idea from the other place and do the another thing. Um, so yeah, I think it's a little bit of a new idea, only a little bit, because it's actually been being done for a long time. but I think it will become more commonplace with time. I think it's kind of an idea whose time has come. And I think that's very encouraging for me as well.
That's a great answer, yeah. And I know before you'd mentioned kind of 30 minutes is a good length of time, and you've pointed to some exercises today. Do you have any personal writing rituals or habits that support your own creativity? Or you may want to keep them secret. It's up to you.
I don't really have any. I mean, I love writing, which is really helpful. I'm kind of a writing addict. If there was Writers Anonymous groups, I think I'd have to go. Um, I write. I'm totally keyboard dependent. I have hand problems. I can't write easily with a pen. I can manage to, write a birthday card or something, but so as long as I've got my laptop, I'm good to go. But I know some people do have rituals. If they're too elaborate, you're probably kidding yourself. If your pre-writing ritual involves cleaning the house from top to bottom, doing all your ironing, and you shouldn't do ironing anyway, it's a waste of time. And all that kind of thing. But some people, for example, I know like to use a particular essential oil on a tissue. They'll smell it and they'll be like, right, that's my writing smell. Others might light a particular candle, or just make a certain drink in a certain mug, or something like that to get them into the writing zone. So yeah, it's never a bad idea. It's not really something I do myself, but I know a lot of people can find it really helpful. My advice is just keep it short and simple. Don't make it big and complicated.
That's great advice. I will move over to audience questions. I see Sarah Miles has asked a great question. So she asked, does the book include any tips on balancing creativity with impact in research, particularly thinking of the traditionally positive health sciences?
Well, that's a really interesting one because there is a fair amount of evidence to show that using creative approaches can enhance research impact. So, for example, Taylor and Francis, who publish academic journals, had a year where they asked people who were submitting to their STEM journals, their science, technology, engineering, and medical journals, to produce cartoon abstracts. And they found that the articles where the author said, yes, we'll do this, and did it, had more downloads, more readers, and therefore more impact. They only did it for a year. I think it was probably somebody's pet project, and that somebody moved department or left or whatever. But there is really evidence to show that this is an absolute thing, that creativity enhances impact in a lot of ways because it's more engaging. And one thing to look at, Sarah, if you're in academia, have a look at the Glasgow University's parasitology department. That's another traditionally positivist health science. They have a wonderful public engagement page. They do comics, they do blogs, they do podcasts, they do a whole load of stuff. And it's highly creative and it makes a lot of sense. I read one of their short comics about a particular parasite and I understood their research, and I know zero about parasitology. I mean zero. So yeah.
Yeah.
Mariam's just got distracted by the cat. It's actually the cat of the, yeah, he's part Maine Coon, so he's enormous. He's now eating biscuits.
Mariam, I
Yes,
know you had said you had a question, and I noticed that you've unmuted. If you do want to ask your question, feel free to speak up. It's entirely up to you. I know Helen is happy to receive questions afterwards as well.
yeah. Although I won't be answering them afterwards because after this I'm going to stop work because I've been at my desk for about 10 hours now. But yeah, medical humanities is a growing field. Oh, Teresa's put a lovely example in the chat from the AMA Journal of Ethics, where there's lots of art. That's a really good example for the academics among us. Betty's saying, I was thinking about the suggestion to use delay and tension from the beginning slides and whether this conflicts with the requirements for academic writing to state your thesis up front, explain the order of your argument at the start. Well, I think in an academic thesis, in the literature review, you can set up conflict between two opposing academic arguments, or three or four, and you don't have to resolve that conflict till you get to the discussion. You can set up the conflict and then say, I will return to this in my discussion chapter, and that will intrigue your readers. So that's one way you could do it. Yeah, I was going to say graphic medicine when somebody said about medical humanities. Teresa said about medical humanities, and graphic medicine is a great resource for along those lines as well. Because although it's medicine, a lot of it is actually more humanities based. because it's about explanations of how different conditions affect people in their actual lives. So there's a lot of crossover. Mm. Yeah, great. Any other questions?
Um, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, my question is very complicated, but I'll try and explain it. Basically, lately, and by lately I mean a few years now, I've been struggling with coming up with ideas because I've always been a very creative person and very imaginative. And when I was a kid, I had like a very vivid imagination. Like I could imagine something in front of me and I would see it as if it's actually there. But lately, it's like it's been fading, and I actually struggle to visualize things, which has absolutely destroyed everything for me. Even just remembering memories that mean a lot to me, and I have terrible memory problems, so that's a huge problem. And then I also have problems with coming up with ideas. So I'm staring at a blank page, whether I'm writing or drawing, and I'm like, I I have so much inside of me, but I don't know. I don't know what to do.
Well, I would use free writing to write down all your ideas. And it can also be if you're having a lot of ideas and they're intruding, it can be useful to have a separate document called ideas. And every time an idea comes to you, stick it in the ideas document so you can think about it later and then carry on with whatever it is you're really
I
trying to
used to
focus
have
on.
I used to have a book specifically for ideas, but the thing
Mm,
is I forgot completely about it, and that seems to be a thing that I keep doing.
right. So it's going back to that then, isn't it? That would be the way to do it, I think. Um, yeah, that would be my suggestion for that, Mariam. Yes,
Thank you so much.
you're welcome. Uh, we have a masked librarian in our midst. Um, there's a library guide. There's lots of really good resources in the chat. I think we're going to save the chat as well and circulate it, so you'll have access to that too. I probably should have said that at the beginning, actually. Sorry about that. If there's anything in the chat if you might want anything deleted, get in touch with Becca, who will be able to help you out with that. If you think you've put something in the chat that you might not want shared, and then Becca can delete that before it gets shared.
Yeah, no
Uh,
problem. And no problem for the discount code, Sarah. I hope you enjoy the book. I'm sure you will. Does anyone have any last questions before we escape into the evening?
well, evening here. Mariam's saying, is
Evening
this going
here.
to be on YouTube? Yes, it's probably going to be on my channel and the University Press, Manchester University Press channel.
Yeah. We'll be sharing the recording with everyone who's signed up via email, and it'll be on our respective social media. So if you're following MUP or Helen, you'll see it. Don't worry. But yeah,
And thank you all for being here. People saying thank you in the chat, which is lovely, and great compliment for Teresa. Thank you.
thank you
Um,
all.
but thank you very much for coming and joining in and making it work, because these things work so much better when people join in. So I'm really grateful to all of you for that. And I hope you all
Absolutely.
have a fabulous rest of the day. And oh, Sarah, you're leaving with a great session, leaving with a motivation boost. Good.
That's what we like to
Um,
hear.
Good luck with all of your writing. Thank you, Lucy. I don't know which Lucy that is, but that feels like somebody maybe I've met before. Wendy, I'm sure have I met you somewhere? I'm sure I have, but I might be making it up. No, maybe not. Okay. I told you I had a terrible memory for names and faces, and it works both ways. I'm like, oh, I know you. Oh, wait, no, I don't. Um, yeah, thank you. And I'm glad you were able to attend too. I'm glad you were all able to attend. Yeah, it's been lovely. Thank you. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your days. Whatever. I would say enjoy your evenings, but I know some of you have a whole afternoon to get through first. Um, thank you. I'll look forward to hearing from you. Oh, maybe that's it, Wendy. Maybe that's where I know you from. Thank you for that. That makes sense. Social media. Yep. Talk to a lot of people on social media at different times. Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. That's been really great. And I think we're going to call it a night. Becca, do you have the chat?
I've got the chat and I will stop
Lovely.
the recording now. So
Marvelous.